3 days after Kelsey Berreth disappeared, her employer received a text message from her phone. Kelsey was quitting her job. Then another text appeared, this one to her fiancé. She needed space. She was stepping back. Don't worry. Her phone was active. Kelsey, apparently, was fine. There was only one problem. Prosecutors would later prove, in a Colorado courtroom, that Kelsey Berreth was already dead when those messages were sent. Someone else had her phone. That person had driven it more than 800 miles from the last place Kelsey was seen alive. And that same person, the one holding a dead woman's phone, typing out texts designed to make the world think she had simply walked away from her life, was about to become the most important witness in the entire investigation. This is the story of how a single phone, used to conceal a murder, ended up exposing one. Woodland Park sits west of Colorado Springs, tucked into the Rocky Mountains in Teller County, Colorado. It's where Kelsey Berreth had built her life. She was 29. A licensed commercial pilot, employed by DOS Aviation out of Pueblo Memorial Airport. She owned her home on Wilkerson Pass Road. She had a 1-year-old daughter named Kaylee. And on November 22, 2018, Thanksgiving Day, security cameras at the local Safeway captured her pushing a grocery cart through the aisles, Kaylee on her hip, buying food for the holiday. She paid. She left. She drove home. It was the last confirmed sighting of Kelsey Berreth alive. November 25, 3 days later. The text to DOS Aviation arrives. Kelsey is quitting, effective immediately. No notice. No prior conversation with her supervisor. Nothing she had ever mentioned wanting to do. Her colleagues read the message and felt something was off. The phrasing wasn't right. The timing made no sense. But it came from her phone number. What were they supposed to do? Another text went to Kelsey's fiancé, Patrick Frazee, a rancher from Florissant, Colorado, roughly 30 miles to the west. The content of that message, according to investigators, was carefully designed to answer the question before it could be asked. Why isn't Kelsey responding? Because she needs space. She's stepping back. She's fine. Kelsey's mother, Cheryl Berreth, started calling. Texting. Getting nothing back that felt like her daughter. On December 2, 10 days after Kelsey was last seen on that security footage, Cheryl walked into the Woodland Park Police Department and filed a missing person report. Investigators began pulling the digital record. What they found immediately did not add up. Kelsey's phone had been active after Thanksgiving. It had sent the texts. It had pinged cell towers. But it wasn't in Woodland Park. It wasn't in Colorado. Investigators traced its movement across state lines, all the way to Gooding County, Idaho. A rural stretch of south-central Idaho, 800 miles from the last place Kelsey was seen. They found the phone there. Discarded. But they did not find Kelsey.
Multiple sources say Kenny and Frazee were romantically involved. Her family says the only reason she helped him is because he allegedly threatened her.
Hotel records.
You see him? He's in cuffs.
Gas receipts.
Frazee now charged with murdering Berreth, last seen Thanksgiving Day.
Kelsey left
her
none
parents
of those,
say they're grateful
which
to
meant one of
prosecutors
two
for
things.
today's plea deal.
Either Kelsey Berreth had somehow moved across 2 states without leaving a single financial or physical trace. Or someone else had moved the phone. Investigators started looking harder at who had connections in Gooding County, Idaho. The answer brought them straight back to Woodland Park. Straight back to the man Kelsey was engaged to marry. Patrick Frazee was 32 years old. He worked his family's horse ranch in Florissant, a rural community in Teller County, the kind of place where people work the land and keep to themselves. From the outside, he and Kelsey made a certain kind of sense. They had met through the equestrian world, a community built around horses where her interests and his work overlapped. They had a daughter together. They were engaged, or said they were. Frazee cooperated with investigators in the early stages. He spoke to detectives. He expressed concern. He had custody of Kaylee, which had been established through a prior arrangement, and he maintained it after Kelsey's disappearance. He told investigators he had been at Kelsey's house on Thanksgiving. He had come for a custody exchange, to pick up Kaylee for the holiday. Kelsey was alive when he left. Everything was normal. That was his account. Investigators looked at everything around it. Financial records, communication logs, the movement of his phone in the days surrounding Thanksgiving, the people in his life, his habits, his contacts, his patterns. And in that examination, something surfaced that Patrick Frazee had not volunteered. He had a relationship with a woman in Idaho. Her name was Crystal Lee Kenny. She was a nurse. She lived in Gooding County, the precise Idaho county where Kelsey's phone had been found, discarded, 800 miles from Woodland Park. That connection, a secret relationship between Frazee and a woman in the exact location where Kelsey's phone ended up, was not something investigators could walk past. They needed to talk to Crystal Lee Kenny. But before they fully understood what Kenny knew, another piece of information was starting to emerge, a piece that reframed everything about Patrick Frazee. This wasn't just a man with a secret relationship. According to what investigators would eventually learn, this was a man who had been trying to have Kelsey Berreth killed for months before Thanksgiving. Not once. Multiple times. And the person he had asked, the person he had approached on separate occasions and described methods to, was Crystal Lee Kenny. Kenny had said no. Each time, according to her own account, she had refused. But she had not gone to police. She had stayed in Frazee's orbit, stayed in contact, and stayed silent, right up until the moment she walked into a law enforcement office in Idaho and the whole architecture of the cover-up began to collapse. What made her walk in? What finally made her talk? And what exactly had she seen when she arrived at Kelsey Berreth's house in the days after Thanksgiving? December 21, 2018. 29 days after Kelsey Berreth was last seen alive. Crystal Lee Kenny drove herself to a law enforcement substation in Gooding County, Idaho, and asked to speak with investigators. What she told them, in that first conversation, and then in subsequent interviews as her cooperation deepened and was formalized through a legal agreement, gave investigators the complete account for the first time. She confirmed she had traveled from Idaho to Woodland Park in the days following Thanksgiving. She confirmed she had arrived at Kelsey Berreth's home. She confirmed what she found inside. Kelsey was dead. Patrick Frazee had already left. Kenny cleaned the scene. She used cleaning supplies, materials that investigators would later trace through purchase records, and she worked to remove evidence of what had occurred. Then she took Kelsey's phone with her. She drove back to Idaho. And over the following days, at Frazee's direction, she sent the texts. The resignation to DOS Aviation. The message to Frazee. The texts that told everyone Kelsey was fine, that she needed space, that she had chosen to step away. Every one of them sent from a dead woman's phone. Then Kenny discarded the phone in Gooding County. And waited. Kenny also told investigators about the months before Thanksgiving, about the conversations in which Frazee had approached her and asked for her help in killing Kelsey. The scenarios he described. The methods he raised. The occasions on which he had asked, and the occasions on which she had refused. She had known what Frazee was capable of. She had known what he wanted. And she had not gone to police. Under oath, at trial, she would acknowledge that directly. The defense would lean on it hard. If she had truly refused and truly feared him, why stay silent? Why not report what he was asking her to do? The implication being that her account was shaped by a plea agreement, by the benefit she stood to receive in exchange for cooperation, by the incentive structure of being a witness who needed to be useful. It's a real question. The jury heard it. But here is what the defense could not argue away. The phone was in Gooding County, Idaho, exactly where Kenny lived, exactly where she said she left it. The purchase records for the cleaning supplies existed. The cell tower data showed the phone's route from Colorado to Idaho consistent with a vehicle trip, consistent with a person driving, not flying, not a random dump. Kenneth's account wasn't a story floating on its own. Every anchor point held. That same day, December 21, 2018, Patrick Frazee was arrested. Investigators searched his ranch in Florissant under warrant. In a burn area on the property, they found evidence consistent with what Kenny had described, the destruction, by fire, of a human body. Kelsey Berreth's complete remains were never recovered. Her parents could not bury their daughter. The destruction of her body was, prosecutors would argue in court, deliberate, a calculated effort to eliminate the most obvious physical proof of the crime. Patrick Frazee had not only killed Kelsey Berreth. He had tried to make her cease to exist entirely. He had almost succeeded. When Kenny started talking, investigators already had pieces of the picture. Now they could test every single one. The first thing they checked was the phone's route. Cell tower data had already placed Kelsey's phone on a path moving northwest from Colorado, through the Rockies, across the state line, into Idaho. When investigators laid that route against the timeline Kenny described, the drive she took, the days she took it, they matched. Not approximately. Precisely. The phone had traveled exactly where Kenny said she carried it. Then they looked at the texts. The timestamps on the resignation message to DOS Aviation. The message to Frazee. Investigators cross-referenced when those texts were sent against where the phone was when it sent them, and the picture that emerged was of a device already in transit, already moving away from Colorado, already in the hands of someone other than Kelsey Berreth. Kelsey's colleagues at DOS Aviation had known something was off the moment that resignation text arrived. They just hadn't been able to prove it. Now the data was proving it for them. Then came the cleaning supplies. Kenny had described using specific materials to clean Kelsey's home. Purchase records placed those materials in Kenneth's possession in the right timeframe. The receipts existed. The timeline held. And when forensic specialists examined the interior of Kelsey's home, looking beneath the surfaces Kenny had worked to clean, they found what they found. Evidence consistent with a violent event. Evidence that the cleaning effort, however deliberate, had not been complete. Then investigators turned to Frazee's ranch in Florissant. Kenny had described the disposal of Kelsey's body. She had described what Frazee told her about what he had done. Investigators went to the property with that account in hand and executed their search warrant. In a burn area on the ranch, they found material consistent with the destruction of human remains. Every anchor point Kenny had given them held. But there was one more thing investigators documented, and it was the kind of evidence that doesn't require a lab or a witness. After November 22, 2018, Kelsey Berreth left no financial trace anywhere. No credit card transaction. No ATM withdrawal. No gas purchase. No hotel check-in. No record of a person moving through the world and spending money, the way every living person does, automatically, constantly, without thinking about it. For weeks after Thanksgiving, Kelsey Berreth simply did not exist in any database anywhere, except as the registered owner of a phone that someone else was carrying. A person who vanishes voluntarily leaves traces of where they went. Kelsey left none. Because she hadn't gone anywhere. The defense had one answer for all of it: Crystal Lee Kenny. She was, in their framing, a woman who had cleaned a murder scene, carried a dead woman's phone across state lines, and sent false texts, and who had then negotiated a 3-year sentence in exchange for placing all of the blame on Patrick Frazee. Every piece of evidence, the defense argued, flowed through Kenny. Her account. Her testimony. Her credibility. Destroy Kenny, and reasonable doubt enters the room. It was the right strategy. It didn't work. Because the cell towers didn't know Kenny. The purchase receipts didn't know her. The forensic findings at Kelsey's home and on Frazee's ranch didn't know her. The 13 days of financial silence in Kelsey's record didn't know her. The evidence wasn't Kenneth's story. Kenneth's story was just the key that made the evidence readable. The jury was about to decide whether they believed it. The trial of Patrick Frazee opened in November 2019. It was held in Park County, Colorado, a change of venue from Teller County, where the pretrial coverage had made a fair jury pool impossible to assemble. Judge Scott Sells presided. District Attorney Linda Stanley led the prosecution. Frazee was charged with first-degree murder after deliberation, first-degree murder with extreme indifference, and solicitation to commit first-degree murder. That last charge covered the occasions, documented through Kenneth's account, when Frazee had allegedly sought her help in killing Kelsey before doing it himself. He pleaded not guilty to all counts. When Kenny took the stand, the courtroom went quiet in the particular way that happens when a witness is about to say something the room has been waiting months to hear. She described the relationship with Frazee, years of it, the nature of it, the emotional hold it had on her. She described the conversations in which he raised the subject of Kelsey's death, not once, but across multiple occasions. She described driving to Colorado. What she found in that house. The cleaning. The phone. The texts. The drive back to Idaho. The defense cross-examined her for an extended period. They pressed the plea agreement, 3 years in exchange for cooperation, a sentence that a woman who had cleaned a murder scene and sent false texts from a dead woman's phone might consider generous. They challenged every inconsistency between her various statements to investigators across the months leading up to trial. They raised the question, again, of why a woman who claimed to fear Frazee had not gone to police when he first asked her to kill Kelsey. Kenny acknowledged the deal. She acknowledged the inconsistencies. She acknowledged she had made choices that she could not undo. The core of her account did not move. Then came the evidence that doesn't negotiate. Forensic specialists testified about the examination of Kelsey's home, what the analysis revealed beneath the cleaned surfaces, consistent with the prosecution's account of a violent event. Cell phone experts testified about the movement of the device, the route, the timestamps, the tower data, and how it mapped precisely onto the account Kenny had given. Investigators who searched Frazee's Florissant Ranch testified about the burn area, about what they found there, about what the forensic analysis of that material indicated. Kelsey's colleagues from DOS Aviation described the resignation text, how it landed wrong, how it didn't sound like her, how the people who had worked with her every day recognized immediately that something was off. Each witness added a layer. Each piece of evidence reinforced the one before it. By the time the prosecution rested, the case they had built was not dependent on Kenny alone. It was a structure, and every part of it was holding. The jury deliberated. On November 19, 2019, 1 year and 2 days after Kelsey Berreth walked out of that Safeway and drove home for the last time, they returned to the courtroom. Guilty. First-degree murder after deliberation. First-degree murder with extreme indifference. Solicitation to commit first-degree murder. All counts. In the gallery, Kelsey's parents, Forrest and Cheryl Berreth, sat with the particular silence of people who had known the truth for almost a year and had spent that year watching others be shown it. Patrick Frazee showed no reaction. At sentencing, on December 13, 2019, Judge Scott Sells sentenced Patrick Frazee to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years on the remaining counts. He would never leave prison. Frazee spoke at sentencing. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge what he had done to Kelsey Berreth. He did not address her parents, Forrest and Cheryl, who were sitting in that room, 15 feet away from him, who had spent 13 months searching for their daughter and then 13 more months watching the case against the man who killed her be built, brick by brick, into something that resulted in this moment. He said nothing that resembled accountability. Forrest Berreth spoke. He spoke about who Kelsey was, not a victim, not a case file, but his daughter. A pilot who loved her work. A mother who adored Kaylee. A woman who had built a life in a mountain town she had chosen and who had had that life taken from her on a holiday, inside her own home, by a man she trusted. He spoke about Kaylee, who was 17 months old on Thanksgiving 2018. Who would grow up in the custody of the Berreth family, surrounded by people who loved her mother, who would one day be old enough to understand what happened and what the people who loved Kelsey did to make sure it didn't go unanswered. Cheryl Berreth spoke. The mother who had filed the missing person report. Who had known from the first unreturned call that something was wrong. Who had refused to accept the texts as real, who had looked at the digital facsimile of her daughter's voice and recognized it as a lie. She had been right. From the very beginning, she had been right. Crystal Lee Kenny had been sentenced earlier, in March 2019, before the trial. Under the terms of her plea agreement, she received 3 years in prison for tampering with physical evidence. For many observers, and for members of Kelsey's family, 3 years was not a sentence that fit the weight of what Kenny had done. By her own account, she had been asked to help kill Kelsey on multiple occasions and had not reported it. She had traveled to the crime scene. She had cleaned it. She had carried the phone across state lines. She had sent the texts that gave Patrick Frazee nearly 2 weeks of additional cover, 2 weeks during which investigators were chasing a ghost instead of narrowing in on a suspect. The legal system, operating within the established framework of cooperation agreements, produced the sentence it produced. Kaylee was placed in the custody of the Berreth family following her father's arrest. She grew up surrounded by the people who loved her mother most. Patrick Frazee made a calculation. He understood, correctly, that in the modern world, a phone is a proxy for a person. That if a phone is active, if it's sending texts and moving and behaving the way a living person's phone behaves, then the person seems to be alive. He understood that the sudden silence of Kelsey's phone would raise questions faster than a few carefully worded messages. So he used her phone. He directed Kenny to carry it, use it, and discard it. He built a fiction out of her own digital identity, used her number, her contact list, her professional relationships, to make Kelsey's absence look like a choice. It worked. For a while. What he miscalculated, what the fiction could not survive, was the specificity of digital evidence. Cell towers record which devices ping them, at what time, from what location. GPS data doesn't negotiate. The route that Kelsey's phone took from Woodland Park to Gooding County, Idaho, was documented automatically, passively, by infrastructure that had no stake in the outcome. When investigators overlaid that route against Patrick Frazee's known connections in Idaho, the name Crystal Lee Kenny surfaced. When investigators approached Kenny, she was carrying the weight of everything she knew, what Frazee had asked her to do before Thanksgiving, what she had found in that house, what she had done in the days that followed. On December 21st, she set it down. The instrument of the cover-up became the instrument of the investigation. The phone that was supposed to explain Kelsey's absence instead drew a line, from a grocery store parking lot in the Colorado mountains, across 800 miles of American landscape, to a rural Idaho county, that pointed directly back to a woman who had seen everything, and who was finally ready to say so. Kelsey Berreth was 29 years old. She was a commercial pilot, a mother, a woman who had built exactly the life she wanted, in a place she had chosen, with a daughter she loved. She was killed on Thanksgiving Day, in her own home, with Kaylee present, by a man who spent the following weeks carefully constructing the appearance of her continued existence. The texts were supposed to be the last word. They weren't. Her mother recognized the silence underneath them. Investigators followed the data past where it was meant to lead. And in a Park County courtroom, 1 year after she disappeared, a jury of 12 people looked at everything that had been assembled, the phone records, the burned site, the purchase receipts, the testimony, the digital trail across 2 states, and said what the evidence had been saying since December 21, 2018. Guilty.
Kelsey's very much a country girl and very down to earth, very grounded, and yeah, the farm was definitely her home.
She's beautiful, a really caring person, very loyal. She really invested a lot of time in her friendships.
She was just an absolute sweetheart to be around, and also fun at the same time. I don't know what else you would want in a friend, but what she had. Even though Kelsey is 3 years younger than myself, she wasn't like the annoying little sister. We just really enjoyed each other's company, and just a very sweet person.
Our school was a little bit smaller, so all of us were really close. We tended to be outdoors a lot of the time, and also just doing each other's makeup, dressing up silly, whatever it was. We always had a really good time together.
I would tell Kaylee that Kelsey had a very strong relationship with God. She was a very spiritual person. She was an absolutely beautiful person. It isn't very often that you see the heart reflect that, and that was the truth with Kelsey. She was just as beautiful inside as she is outside.
I would tell her how much her mom loved her, that she was so special to her, and that she was a very beautiful person, pure, good heart, a good friend.
She'd smile all the way up to her eyes. When I saw her little daughter, I thought she's gonna look just like her mom. Her daughter's eyes sparkle like Kelsey's.